Hades, Scar, Mother Gothel, Ursula, and that one kid from Toy Story whose parents didn't pay him enough attention, if you are anything like me, it's usually the villains that steal the show when it comes to a Disney movie. They're some of the most exciting, dramatic, and interesting characters that their movies have to offer, but let's be honest, not all villains are created equal. And today, we are going through every major Disney villain, breaking down what makes them special, and most importantly, we will be asking the big question. Which of these big bads is the biggest and baddest?
What am I, boys? She's the bad guy.
Okay, well, to be fair, we aren't going to be covering every villain. As much as I would love to dedicate a full segment to Cad Spinner from the cinematic masterpiece Planes, Fire, and Rescue, we're going to have to skip over some of the more minor examples. We're also going to be skipping sequel-only villains, so sorry if you're a big fan of Aladdin King of Thieves, Saluk won't be on here. Don't worry though, we still have nearly 40 villains to go through, so chances are your favorite will be on the list. And really quick, if you're enjoying the content, remember to hit the like button and subscribe, but more importantly, let us know what you want to see next. This channel is by the people, for the people, and your input will help shape what we make. Alright, with the YouTube stuff out of the way, let's talk villains, starting with, by far, the least evil of all Disney villains, Taka. Taka is the main villain of Moana, a towering lava monster who violently guards the sea, lashing out at anyone who dares come close to her island. At first, she appears to be this unstoppable, wrathful, and terrifying force of nature. However, the truth is a bit more tragic. Taka is actually Tefiti, the goddess of creation whose heart was stolen by Maui. Without her heart, she was consumed by grief and transformed into a creature of destruction. She literally had her heart stolen from her and is just desperate to take it back. What makes Taka such a powerful and memorable villain is that she isn't a villain. She is a victim. We see her charging at Moana, seemingly willing to kill her to take her heart back, but the second that she is given it, she immediately calms down and finds peace again. Tefiti doesn't want to hurt anyone, she wasn't acting maliciously or hatefully, she was just desperate to be made whole again, and that is why she is the clear choice for the least evil Disney villain of all time. After Taka, we have one of my personal favorite Disney villains, John Silver from Treasure Planet. He is a rough and tumble pirate captain who we see infiltrating Jim's ship as a cook with his crew and planning to lead a mutiny against them to steal their treasure. If you asked any one of his crew what he was like, they'd say John Silver's a greedy cutthroat who only cares about getting rich. But as the story goes on, we see a different side of him. He forms a real bond with Jim, who, like Silver, is looking for purpose and belonging. Their relationship grows into something resembling a father-son dynamic, and that connection slowly eats away at Silver's greed. Silver's interesting because while he definitely is a villain through most of the movie, he also definitely struggles to keep up appearances. He genuinely cares for Jim and no part of him wants to hurt him, but at the same time, his crew has very strong expectations that he needs to live up to. Because if he doesn't, his crew will rise up and become a much more dangerous threat either way. At least if he is still in charge, he can control how bad things could get. In the end, Silver is given a choice between saving Jim or getting the treasure that he so desperately was chasing after. And ultimately, he decides that his new found family is worth more than a literal planet's worth of gold and jewels. Sure, he's a bit of a bad guy, but he's not a bad guy. And so he is certainly one of Disney's least evil villains by far. On to a movie that is criminally underrated with Meet the Robinsons' Goob. Goob starts out as Lewis's roommate in the orphanage. He's just a regular kid who misses an important catch at a baseball game because Lewis kept him up all night while working on an invention. It is a very small moment, but for Goob, it changes everything. That game was the only thing he was looking forward to in life, and so when he loses it, he becomes obsessed. All he can talk about is how he should have won, and this obsession results in him never being adopted, never letting himself make friends, and never moving on in life. Eventually, this bitterness lets Doris manipulate him into stealing Lewis's invention and trying to ruin his future. That said, Goob is a kinda goofy villain, and it's a bit hard to take him seriously. But in reality, he doesn't want to take over the world, he doesn't even really want to hurt people. He just feels forgotten and like no one ever cared about him. He is a misguided kid who misplaced his anger and never let himself move on. And all of that just stunted him. So he's not exactly a supervillain. And on a kind of similar note, we have Mardu from Brave. Legends speak of an ancient kingdom where 4 princes maintain balance, but one of them reached out to a witch, asking for the strength of 10 men so that he could conquer his brothers. The witch then turned him into a bear, and ultimately the kingdom fell into ruins. However, that wasn't all. After being a bear for a few days, the prince lost all sense of his self and was fully turned into an animal with no way of ever going back. And that's the important thing here. By the time Merida and her family come across Mardu, he is literally just a bear. Like, sure, he's a big, scary bear with scars and spears sticking out of his body, but he is still just a bear. And I don't really blame an animal for acting like an animal at the end of the day. However, because the original prince kinda sucked, we are putting him ahead of John Silver, though he isn't that person anymore. And keeping on this track of not really having accountability, we're also not going to hold a kid to the same standards that we would most adults. So that brings us to Sid from Toy Story. Sid tortures, takes apart, and combines his toys in brutal and horrific ways. And while that might seem a little bit on the psychopathic side, I mean, A, he is just a kid, and kids do that sometimes, though admittedly in maybe a less drastic way, and B, he doesn't know the toys are alive, which is a pretty important thing to consider here. All in all, he's still mostly on the harmless side of the list. Sure, he's a bit weird, but it isn't like he's trying to kill anyone or take over a kingdom. Which I guess leads us to the Emperor's New Grooves, Yzma. This might be a bit of a surprise to some of you. I mean, Yzma is Yzma, right? She's not exactly a great person, and you're correct. Yzma is where I consider us to be entering the actually bad people part of our villain list. However, I don't think she's really that bad. A part of the story I think most people overlook is that Yzma was a loyal part of the kingdom, even basically raising Cusco as his parents were too busy running the kingdom at most times. But then Cusco became emperor, and one of the first things he does is fire her. Up until that point, Yzma had been weird, sure, but she wasn't evil. However, when Cusco fires her, she feels betrayed, and so she decides to return the favor, killing him and usurping his throne. I'm not saying that she is right to try and kill him, but I definitely get her being a little bit upsetty spaghetti. And that's going to be a pretty common theme of this part of the list. People whose actions or emotions are understandable, but who take things too far. Though some of them just aren't great in general, like Chef Skinner from Ratatouille. After the death of the great Chef Gusteau, Skinner takes control of his restaurant and tries to milk it for every cent that it's worth. And he is serious about making as much money as possible. Which means that when Gusteau's son, Alfredo Linguini, shows up, he is a real problem for him. At first, Linguini seems like he is a total screw-up, but soon he starts showing actual cooking talent thanks to Remy the rat, which leads Skinner to become obsessed with uncovering the truth and keeping his grip on the restaurant. While Yzma tried to kill and usurp Cusco to take revenge, Skinner tries to keep Linguini away from inheriting the restaurant out of pure greed. He didn't have to be slighted or betrayed to be like this, he's just like this naturally. And yeah, he's obviously not trying to take Linguini's life, but he is keeping him from living the life that he was meant to have. I think what makes Skinner worse than Yzma is that it isn't personal, it's just him trying to hurt someone else so that he can get ahead. And while we're on the topic of selfish control freaks, we can jump to the Queen of Hearts from Alice in Wonderland. The Queen is less of a master villain and more of a chaotic force of nonsense and fury. She rules over Wonderland with zero consistency and an endless supply of temper tantrums. Now admittedly, she is a bit of a jump up here in severity, as she does have that nasty habit of ordering innocent people to be beheaded, but no one's perfect. The Queen of Hearts is basically a walking ball of rage, ready to blow her top at the drop of a mad hat. In the end, I wouldn't say she's so much evil though, as she is a completely unstable nutcase with too much authority. Speaking of unstable, over in the Nightmare Before Christmas, we have the Oogie Boogie Man. Oogie Boogie is a burlap sack filled with creepy crawlies obsessed with gambling, torture, and being flashy. Like the Queen of Hearts, this guy is all about chaos. However, he is much more rational about his approach to it. I hate to make the comparison, but he's kinda similar to the Joker, making elaborate and well thought out plans, all for the sake of following his chaotic impulses. While the movie's lead, Jack Skellington, as well as the majority of the inhabitants of Halloween Town, have an almost Addams Family-style approach to horror and mischief, Oogie Boogie seems to be the only one actually set on hurting people, even kidnapping Santa Claus and planning to kill him in a full-on musical number about how much he loves being evil. And I think there's definitely something to be said about the style element of Oogie Boogie that makes him really feel memorable and impactful. He is just as cool as he is terrifying. He has so much flair in every aspect of who he is that you almost can't help but love him. It's like taking the already flamboyant Yzma and cranking that feeling up to 11. He's an absolutely fantastic villain and probably the first one on the list to really embody evil. Next up, we have Gantu from Lilo and Stitch. He is the Galactic Federation's big, imposing enforcer, a straight-laced, no-nonsense military officer tasked with maintaining order and capturing dangerous experiments. When sent to capture Stitch, Gantu immediately resorts to brute force. He's all about following orders and keeping the peace, but he does everything full throttle. Honestly, I wouldn't say Gantu is really evil, he's just dangerously rigid and prideful. He doesn't care about the nuance of a situation or the emotional toll that his actions take. While he's far from the most evil character on this list, Gantu absolutely earns a spot as one of the more dangerously misguided ones. He doesn't hate anyone, he just sees people as numbers on a mission report, and that can allow him to do very evil things. From there, we can talk about Otto from WALL-E, who is one of the more subtle Disney villains, but also one of the most quietly terrifying. Otto is the Axiom's autopilot system, and he has been faithfully carrying out an ancient, top-secret directive that humans should never return to Earth. This means that when Wally and Eve arrive with literal proof that life is sustainable again, Otto does everything he can to suppress that information and maintain the status quo, even if it means dooming humanity to float around on lazy chairs forever as a result. The thing is, Otto doesn't hate anyone, he isn't greedy, he isn't angry, he is just following an order. But that's exactly the point. He is a symbol of blind, emotionless obedience taken to an extreme. He nearly kills the captain, tosses Wally around like garbage, and actively tries to erase all hope of restoring Earth, all under the calm, robotic belief that he is doing what's best. He is the embodiment of good intentions turned evil. But from here we have another big step up, and we can pivot to something way more dramatic with Hades, the god of the underworld in Hercules. He is probably one of the most iconic and entertaining villains Disney has ever given us. He's got the sass of a talk show host, the temper of a caffeinated gremlin, and the flair of someone who definitely rehearses his evil monologues in front of the mirror. But what leaves Hades in this middle ground section is that while he does do some terrible stuff, it is still pretty understandable why he's so upset. Way back when the world was divided between Hades, Zeus, and Poseidon, Hades was given dominion over the underworld, meaning that he would essentially be forced to live in darkness for all of eternity and only be able to interact with the dead. Meanwhile, his brothers ruled the sea and the sky from Olympus. And eternity is a long enough time to start feeling pretty bitter about that sort of thing. And so, after millennia of feeling imprisoned by his brothers, he turned to the Titans, deities who similarly had been locked away, and he used them to overthrow Olympus and finally claim a place in the sun. So, while the whole manipulating Meg into betraying Hercules after buying her soul thing is pretty rough, it isn't so bad that it takes away from his story or makes him actually hateable. He is someone desperately trying to gain his own freedom, and while he does it in an awful way, it might realistically be the only way of doing it. On top of that, Hades doesn't just target people at random to be evil towards them, he is only a monster towards those who have been terrible to him. Well, and their children, and Pain and Panic, and anyone who makes a deal with him, but it isn't like he's just targeting random civilians, at least. Overall, he just feels really well-rounded, evil, but with a set of rules that he plays by, which keeps him in the middle. I'd say anyone beyond this point is significantly evil. And a good example of that is Charles Muntz from Up. He starts off as this childhood hero and ends up a full-blown villain, obsessed with gaining validation. He was once a famous explorer admired around the world until scientists questioned the legitimacy of his findings. And in trying to prove them wrong, Muntz decided to never return home until he could bring back proof of the exotic bird he discovered. When Carl and Russell finally meet him in South America, they expect a kindly old man, and instead find someone who has gone completely off the rails. Muntz had spent hunting this poor bird and has literally built an army of talking dogs to help him do it. And when he sees Carl with Kevin, he doesn't hesitate to try and kill him. What makes Muntz so great is that his fall is believable. He isn't evil from the start, he becomes evil out of pride, obsession, and the need to be respected. He still could have gone down in history as a hero, but instead he was ready to commit murder and destroy lives just to prove that he was correct. And unlike Hades, who was aiming to get his own freedom and escape a life being trapped in the underworld, Muntz was just doing this to satisfy his own ego. But I know what you're thinking. What if we took away all of Hades and Charles's charm and the little morality they had and turned them into the most terrible thing to ever walk the earth? A politician. Well, then you'd have Hans from Frozen, our next villain, and a considerable jump up on the evil scale. And honestly, this man deserves a round of applause for how perfectly he plays the sweet prince angle before pulling the ultimate bait and switch. He spends most of the movie acting like the perfect gentleman, supportive, respectful, humble. He even sings an adorable lovey-dovey duet with Anna, and then bam! He reveals that he's been manipulating her the entire time just to seize the throne. Hans is interesting because he doesn't have any magic or really anything to make him more powerful. Everything that he accomplishes is purely through manipulation that anyone is capable of. And this lack of anything special actually makes him more of a scary villain because it feels more real. And why does he do all of these awful things? Because he thinks he deserves to rule the kingdom. And he's more than happy to lie, gaslight, and let Anna die to get what he wants. He is cold, calculated, he has no remorse for his actions. He even goes so far as to try and frame Elsa for murder to solidify his position. Hans is brutally cutthroat and willing to take out anyone in his path, even if they are completely innocent, and that puts him far above anyone else that we've talked about so far. But what is trying to take over a kingdom in comparison to wiping out an entire game? Alright, that sounded more serious in my head, but in Wreck-It Ralph, trust me, that's a big deal. King Candy seems like just your average stuffy video game monarch who wants things his way, but the truth is so much darker and weirder. He's actually a racer from another game who got jealous of a newer title and tried to steal their spotlight. When that didn't work, he literally hacked himself into Sugar Rush, erases everyone's memory, and takes over as king. But he didn't just sabotage a game, he destroyed his own and then infiltrated another, essentially becoming a virus. He fools Vanellope into thinking that she's a glitch, manipulates everyone around him, and ultimately turns into a monstrous, glitching abomination. It's not about revenge or even power, it's about refusing to be forgotten. And that desperation, mixed with how manipulative and ruthless he becomes, makes King Candy a surprisingly twisted villain. Next, let's jump over to Syndrome from The Incredibles. Syndrome is kind of the poster child for revenge villain goes too far. Originally just a kid named Buddy Pine who idolizes Mr. Incredible and desperately wanted to be a hero's sidekick, Syndrome becomes a villain not because of some tragedy or injustice, but because his hero hurt his feelings. That's it. Mr. Incredible tells him to go home, and Buddy takes it so personally that he spends the rest of his life building deadly technology to murder superheroes. But here's what makes him such a dangerous villain. Where others before him have been completely consumed by revenge and didn't have much else going for them, Syndrome has a real plan. He starts hunting and killing actual heroes to test out his battle robot, and then unleashes it into a city and swoops in to save the day, all to become famous. Then, once he's worn the mask of a hero, he plans to sell his invention so that everyone can be super because, in his words, when everyone is super, no one will be. Syndrome was willing to commit mass murder all so that he could create a false utopia where no one needed to rely on heroes anymore. Instead, the entire world would become dependent on him and his technology, and once they were in his hand, he would have full control. Remaining on this idea of fooling people to create a world in the villain's image, we can also take a look at Dawn Bellwether from Zootopia. Bellwether is probably one of the most underrated villains in Disney. After all, she doesn't look all that threatening, and she can definitely feel like she lacks visual impact. She's not exactly Oogie Boogie or Hades, right? But don't be fooled, Bellwether is a wolf in sheep's clothing. Well, I mean, she's a sheep in sheep's clothing, but you know what I mean. Belellweather is cold, calculated, and subtly terrifying. She starts off as the assistant mayor, seemingly sweet and overworked, but behind the scenes she is running an entire conspiracy to weaponize fear. She uses a toxic serum to make predators go savage, then pushes the narrative that they are dangerous by nature. Remember how Hans tried to frame Elsa? Well, Belellweather is trying to frame every predator in Zootopia. Worse yet, she is actually making them do the terrible things that she is accusing them of, and because they are technically the ones responsible, that makes the fear of predators all the more reasonable. All of this to make the prey animals afraid enough to support her leadership and policies. It's basically propaganda-fueled political manipulation with a side of biological warfare. She wants to reshape society based on a deeply prejudiced worldview, and she's smart enough to know exactly how to do it. There's no chaotic outburst, no tragic origin, just a schemer using fear to divide people. Now, from one of the newest female villains to the first one, the original evil stepmother behind Disney's animated movie empire, the evil queen from Snow White. And quick side note, if you are enjoying this video and want more Disney content, we recently released a full history of Disney princesses, which goes back all the way to Snow White in the 1930s. It's a surprisingly interesting watch, and you should definitely check it out. Anyways, the Evil Queen is a very simple villain, which makes sense as someone who set the stage for the first of her kind. She's not complex, she's not subtle, she is pure narcissism, distilled into a single murderous royal. The Evil Queen is jealous that Snow White is prettier than she is and responds by hiring a huntsman to take her out into the woods and kill her. And when that doesn't work, she goes full hag mode and poisons Snow White with a cursed apple that traps her in an eternal sleep. She is iconic because of how straightforward her villainy is. There's no big plan, no emotional backstory, she's not even seeking power or fighting injustice. She just wants to be the prettiest, and if she has to murder her competition to get there, so be it. Don't get me wrong, I am a sucker for more thoughtful and sympathetic villains, but there is something refreshing about simplicity from time to time. Nearly 20 years later, Disney released Peter Pan, and with it came another iconic villain, Captain Hook. Hook is a weird one because he walks the plank between being a menacing monster and a total joke. And I think that's exactly what makes him such a fun entry. Hook is the pirate captain of Neverland who wants Peter Pan dead for cutting off his hand and feeding it to a crocodile, which, to be fair, pretty valid reason to hold a grudge. But Hook's obsession with Peter doesn't come from pure malice. It's more of a childish rivalry taken to an absurd extreme. He's this grown man surrounded by lost boys stuck in a world that runs on imagination. A world that Hook simultaneously looks down on and is jealous of. On the one hand, he is this brutal pirate who kidnaps, lies, cheats, and even tries to murder children. But on the other hand, he's this goofy dude who's afraid of ticking clocks and who is constantly being humiliated by the very boys he's trying to destroy. Hook isn't the scariest villain on this list, but he is very dangerous. Just in a more almost Looney Tunes kind of way. He's elegant, ruthless, comically dramatic, and definitely pretty evil. From some of the most iconic villains to one that is often forgotten. Prince John from Robin Hood, who, like Hook, is both hilarious and horrifying depending on how close you look at him. On the surface, he's this whiny man-child with mommy issues who throws temper tantrums whenever someone brings up his older brother, King Richard. Cowardly and easily manipulated, especially by his snake advisor, Sir Hiss. But underneath all of that, he is a tyrant. Prince John imposes crushing taxes on the people of Nottingham, throws entire families into jail when they can't pay, and lets his greed completely gut the kingdom while pretending that he is the rightful ruler. And unlike some other villains, he knows what he is doing. He's not inept, he is cruel on purpose. Hans, King Candy, and even Hook were doing terrible things out of self-interest, but Prince John seems to really enjoy being malicious to those he sees as lesser than himself. What makes Prince John so despicable is that his villainy isn't dramatic or flashy, it is direct and simple. He lets people starve, lets them suffer, and lets them die, while he hoards wealth and mocks their misery, all because he is insecure, jealous, and greedy. He might look ridiculous sucking his thumb, but make no mistake, he is one of the most insidiously evil characters in Disney history. Then we've got Yokai, or Professor Callaghan from Big Hero 6. Like many great Disney villains, Yokai's is a story of revenge. He is a brilliant robotics professor who seemed like a mentor to Hiro, until it's revealed that he caused the fire that killed Hiro's brother, Tadashi. Worse still, he uses Hiro's invention, the microbots, to fake his death and start a plan to destroy the man he blames for his daughter's disappearance. But where other characters might feel remorse or wrestle with their morals, Yokai is completely consumed by his revenge. He's willing to destroy an entire city, hurt innocent people, and betray the trust of his students, all so he can get back at the man who hurt him. But what makes him land so high on this list is that, like Syndrome, he knows better. He's not an unhinged lunatic, he's a brilliant man who chose to become a monster. And speaking of monsters, next we have Ernesto de la Cruz from Coco. And this is probably one of the most cold-blooded villains in recent history. At first, Ernesto is supposed to be this beloved legend. He's charismatic, talented, a national treasure. But as Miguel discovers, that fame came at a horrific cost. Ernesto murdered his best friend Hector and stole his songs and then claimed them as his own. And he didn't just do it in the heat of the moment, he poisoned him, and then made sure that he never got credit for all the great music that he created. When Hector's descendants start to uncover the truth, Ernesto does everything in his power to silence them. He tries to kill Miguel in the afterlife just to keep his legacy intact. But I think what really elevates De La Cruz on this list is that he wasn't just killing someone random or taking revenge like so many other people on this list. De La Cruz was willing to kill his best friend just to become famous. Like, at least Hans was just trying to kill a girl he had just met to control the entire kingdom. This is far more personal for far less profit. After De La Cruz, we have Lady Tremaine, the evil stepmother from Cinderella. She is probably the most down-to-earth and realistic of all Disney villains. Like, this is just a woman who could exist in real life with no changes. She's a social climber obsessed with status and control, and she takes out her bitterness and resentment on the person least able to defend herself, Cinderella. Tremaine never raises her voice, never lays a hand on Cinderella, but her cruelty is constant. She treats her like a servant, emotionally abuses her, and does everything in her power just to make sure that she never has a chance to be happy. Then, when Cinderella gets invited to the ball, Tremaine escalates. She destroys her dress, locks her in the room, and does whatever she can to ensure that her daughters get ahead instead of Cinderella. Her evil is small, domestic, and personal, and that's what makes it incredibly potent. She doesn't need to use things like fire or magic to ruin Cinderella's life, she just has a bitter heart and a key that locks the door behind her. On to Clayton from Tarzan, and he is one of those villains that, obviously not a great guy, but then you watch how far he's willing to go and you realize, oh, no, this guy is evil. He starts out playing the role of this dashing protector, leading the expedition, wielding a rifle, and acting like he's there to help Jane and her father study gorillas. But it becomes very clear that his real motive is profit. Clayton is a poacher, and he views the jungle and its inhabitants as nothing more than trophies to be claimed. Once he finds out that Tarzan can lead him to the gorillas, he doesn't hesitate to manipulate him, betray him, and eventually try to slaughter an entire gorilla troop. And the moment that he doesn't get what he wants, he escalates things drastically. He's willing to imprison, shoot, or kill anyone in front of him. He is ready to kill Tarzan, Jane, and her father, all in the hopes of capturing and selling these animals, and it's this very greed and ruthlessness that leads to his own death. Like De La Cruz and Lady Tremaine, the thing that really separates Clayton from many Disney villains before him is that he isn't really motivated by revenge or any deeper meaning. He is purely trying to make a profit, and to him, that money is worth more than the lives of any person or animal that he might come across. But as we move on from here, we are officially at the cream of the crop, the worst of the worst that Disney villains have to offer, and I think that it's pretty fair that we start off with Ursula. Ursula is not just a sea witch, she is a total diva, full of dramatic flair, manipulation, and raw power. And what makes her really stand out is that she doesn't operate through brute force. She uses contracts, deceptions, and mind games. Like all of her victims before, Ariel comes to her willingly. She's desperate for a chance to live on land, and Ursula gives her what she wants, but not without burying some nasty fine print in the details. Her goal is to dethrone King Triton and take control of the ocean, and she does it by using Ariel as a pawn in a long-term plan for revenge. And it almost works. However, even after taking Ariel's voice, she still manages to win Eric's heart, and so Ursula intervenes, transforming herself into Vanessa and trying to sabotage Ariel's shot at love. She hypnotizes Eric and even transforms into a massive sea monster in a final bid for power. Not only did she give a brutally unfair deal, but then she gets involved and manipulates things even further with her magic. But the reason that she's not quite at the top of this list is that, like many classic Disney villains, her evil, it is just playing dirty on top of playing dirty, all in an effort to be as selfish as possible. And in a very similar lane, we have Dr. Facilier from The Princess and the Frog. This dude brings a whole different vibe. He is slick, he's charming, he's got friends on the other side. Facilier is a con man at heart, using sleight of hand and sweet talking to manipulate people into deals that ultimately trap them. He preys on the weak, the desperate, and the greedy, telling people exactly what they want to hear while setting them up for failure. He is basically Ursula on land, if I'm being honest. And the two of them actually share a lot, even having similar end goals. However, one thing does separate them. Ursula is fully in control of her powers, whereas Facilier borrows his. He needs to give souls to the friends on the other side, because if he can't, they will take his instead. And that makes him just as desperate as the people he is trying to fool. While Ursula plays just as dirty as Facilier does, he is even more willing to take advantage of those around him and goes to even greater lengths to steal their souls because his life is on the line if he doesn't. Sticking in the Americas, we have Governor Ratcliffe from Pocahontas, who is so easy to hate because he is the embodiment of colonial greed and arrogance. Again, he doesn't use magic or have a tragic backstory. He is just an entitled, pompous, and cruel man who believes that he's superior to entire populations of people, and he is willing to commit genocide to prove it. Ratcliffe arrives in the New World with gold in his eyes, convinced that conquering and exploiting the land will earn him fame and fortune. When he doesn't find immediate success, he stirs up fear, racism, and violence, painting the indigenous people as savages just to justify killing them. Ratcliffe doesn't care about anyone but himself. He doesn't grow, he doesn't regret, and he doesn't see people as people. He is just evil, and there isn't really anything else to it. And I think that flatness really leaves Ratcliffe feeling like he has a lack of staying power and flair. He's not exactly an iconic villain, despite Pocahontas being an iconic movie, which is kind of the opposite of our next villain, who is arguably the most influential in establishing all of the ones that followed her. Ladies and gents, from Kingdom Hearts fame, Maleficent. And I guess she's also in Sleeping Beauty or whatever. Maleficent is dramatic, theatrical, and utterly unforgettable. But admittedly, her motives are probably the most petty on the list. King Stefan throws a party to celebrate the birth of his daughter Aurora and invites the entire kingdom with the exception of Maleficent. Despite that, she crashes the party anyways, and she is ultimately asked to leave, but on her way out, someone asks if she is upset, and she tells them that she isn't, adding that she even brought a gift for the new baby. That gift being a curse that she puts on Aurora. Before anyone can stop her, Maleficent vanishes. And the worst part of this curse is that it isn't instant, meaning that for the next 16 years, the royals need to wait in fear until their daughter inevitably falls into an eternal sleep. In fact, they get so scared that they send Aurora away to live with Flora, Fauna, and Merryweather to keep her safe. Listen, you gotta be some kind of evil to curse a baby because their parents didn't invite you to a party. Maleficent isn't greedy, she isn't power hungry, she doesn't even have a real end goal. She is just unbelievably petty and vindictive. Oh, and she can turn into a dragon, which doesn't really make her more evil, but it does add style points. And speaking of style, next we have Cruella de Vil from 101 Dalmatians. A woman who literally wants to skin puppies to make a coat. I'm not sure how much more I really got to get into this one here. This is pretty clear-cut evil. Cruella is not interested in power, revenge, or even money. She has everything she needs. The only interest that she has is what she wants. And what she wants is to skin roughly 100 puppies to wear as clothes. And of course, she sees no problem with this. As far as she is concerned, she is entitled to the skin of these puppies because she is above everyone else. And that means that she can treat anyone and anything as her property. She can bully, beat, and berate anything in front of her. De Vil is the devil, and that's all there is to it. Next, we have one of my personal favorite villains, Jafar from Aladdin, who is willing to go pretty Jafar to take what he wants. He is the textbook definition of ambition taken to horrifying extremes, which is crazy because at the start of the movie he is already the second most powerful person in the kingdom. He's the Sultan's royal vizier, someone who essentially already rules the kingdom from behind the scenes. Well, unless the Sultan gets distracted and stops listening to him, then he's not super impactful. But despite the power that Jafar already had, he was also secretly scheming behind the Sultan's back to try and usurp him. But what sets him apart is how quickly Jafar escalates. He doesn't just want to be in charge, he wants everything. Being the Sultan's advisor isn't enough, so he has to hypnotize the Sultan to always get his way. He lies to everyone around him, uses them like pawns, and then eventually gets his hands on the genie's lamp. And when he does, his ambition only grows. Suddenly, becoming the Sultan isn't enough. He's not satisfied with the idea of ruling Agrabah, so instead, he needs to become an all-powerful sorcerer, and he uses that power to torment Aladdin, Jasmine, and the Sultan because he just enjoys making people suffer. But even this power isn't enough. Jafar becomes so greedy and so insecure in his own strength that Aladdin manages to easily jeer him into wishing to become a genie, ultimately obtaining phenomenal cosmic power at the expense of being trapped in an itty-bitty living space. Now, from usurper to warlord, we can move over to Mulan's Sha Yu. From the beginning, Sha Yu is treated like a looming shadow of death. He says almost nothing, but everything about his design just screams that he is a menace. He invades China not for conquest, but to prove that the Great Wall and all of China's defenses are meaningless before him. He's all about pride. He wants to provoke fear. He wants the Emperor to see that nothing can stop him. Sha Yu wipes out entire armies and villages without hesitation. He does whatever he has to prove his own strength to his enemies. And I think that differentiates him from many of the previous entries on this list. Sha Yu is purely trying to wreak havoc and destroy everything he comes across. His whole personality is brutality and rage, and he is definitely another example of less being more when it comes to a villain, leaving a massive impact on the audience. He is straightforward and bloodthirsty, and that is just enough. That said, when it comes to leaving an impact, even Sha Yu doesn't hold a candle next to our next entry, Scar from the Lion King. Like many on this list, Scar is driven by ambition, jealousy, and a thirst for power. His brother Mufasa is king, and he wants to rule so badly that he murders him by dropping him into a stampede. And if that wasn't enough, he then gets rid of the rightful heir, Simba, by blaming him for Mufasa's death. He plays it off as giving the kid a chance to escape before others come after him for killing his father, but it's all just part of Scar's plan to ensure that no one is left to question him inheriting the throne. So we have someone who killed his own brother and framed his own nephew. Scar believes he would be a great ruler, right? After all, why would he be so desperate to take the spotlight if he didn't? Well, actually, no. Scar is so disinterested and terrible as a ruler that the entire kingdom becomes a nearly unlivable wasteland. He's like a kid who throws a temper tantrum over not getting a toy, and the second that he does get it, he loses all interest and throws it away. Except the temper tantrum was killing his brother, and the toy was countless animal lives throughout the kingdom. So, you know, a little bit worse, I guess. Following Scar, we have Mother Gothel from Tangled. At a glance, she might not seem like she belongs in the same tier as the monstrous powerhouses we just covered, because, you know, she's not out here waging war or committing mass murder, but her evil is extremely personal. Gothel steals baby Rapunzel so that she can exploit her magic hair and stay young and beautiful forever. And while kidnapping a child is already horrific, what makes Gothel stand out is the slow, insidious abuse that she inflicts over the course of years. She locks Rapunzel away in a tower, but she doesn't act like a standard captor. She pretends to be her mother. She raises her, praises her, scolds her, manipulates her with love bombs and passive-aggressive insults. Gothel gaslights at every turn, drilling into Rapunzel's head that the world is cruel, that she is weak, and that only Gothel can keep her safe. It is textbook emotional abuse, and it's not framed with any ambiguity. When Rapunzel starts to realize the truth, Gothel immediately drops the facade and becomes overtly cruel, calling her naive, stupid, and ungrateful. Gothel doesn't love Rapunzel, she loves what Rapunzel can give her. She represents the kind of villain who warps someone's entire sense of reality for their own gain, and that makes her one of Disney's most psychologically disturbing characters. It is a much more subtle kind of evil, but by no means is it any less devastating. Now, moving into our final four, and we have another pretty big jump. Starting with Rourke from Atlantis, who doesn't get talked about nearly enough, but he should. He may not have the flair of Scar or the power of Sha Yu, but Rourke is scary in an all-too-real way. He's a military man who pretends to be leading an expedition to discover a lost civilization, but from the start, his real goal is to plunder it. Honestly, it's pretty similar to where we started with Clayton. And like Clayton, Rourke doesn't care about the culture, the people, the history. All he cares about is making money. When they discover Atlantis and see that it's still populated, his plans don't change in the slightest. The only difference is that now he's going to have to kill a few people on his way to becoming rich. And a few people might be an understatement. But when his own crew turns on him because of the whole genocide thing, Rourke doesn't blink, he just keeps escalating. He turns on everyone who gets in his way. There's no big emotional backstory, no justification, he just wants to cash in, and he'll leave an entire civilization to rot if it means a bigger paycheck. But not all major villains can be larger than life, some of them are actually quite small. Meet Hopper from A Bug's Life, who may be one of the most effective depictions of tyranny in Disney and Pixar history. Hopper is the leader of the grasshoppers, and he rules not through power or strength, but through fear. Just pure oppression. He forces the ants to gather food for him and his gang under the threat of annihilation. When he hears that the ants might be considering rebellion, he doesn't just threaten them. He kills one of his own men to make a point. No one is safe when it comes to Hopper. And this is his power. He knows that the ants could easily overthrow him if they work together, but as long as he keeps them paralyzed in fear, they will always bend to his will. He is a dictator, plain and simple. And even when Flick starts inspiring the colony, Hopper immediately goes on the offensive. He doesn't care about the food anymore, that's not important. What's important is showing the ants that if they rise up against him, he will make them regret it. What's important is control. Hopper isn't anything super departed from what we've seen from Disney before. We've had a slew of tyrants and bullies, but the way that he rules and his calculated relationship with using fear as a weapon makes him stand out far above the rest. Now on to our runner-up, Froolo from The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Possibly the most complex, repulsive, and realistic villain Disney has ever created. I'm not sure how long it's been for all of you since you've watched this movie, but just as a refresher, the first thing that we see Froolo doing is imprisoning a dude trying to sneak into Paris, and then hunting down a woman and her baby through the streets on his horse. The woman actually makes it all the way to Notre Dame and even claims sanctuary, only for Froolo to kill her by kicking her down the steps of the church. Then he grabs her baby, sees how ugly it is, and tries to drown him. So we've had imprisonment, murder, and attempted baby murder, and we aren't even 5 minutes into the movie. In fact, he hasn't even been on screen for 2 minutes at this point. Froolo ends up getting stopped before he can manage to throw the baby down a well, and ultimately he raises the baby, Quasimodo, as a prisoner in the bell tower, convincing him that he is a monster and saying that he is protecting him by keeping him out of the public eye. But his most infamous and deeply disturbing arc begins when he becomes obsessed with Esmeralda. He doesn't want her dead, he wants her for himself. He tries to suppress his lust, sees her as a sinful temptation, and blames her for his own feelings. The song Hellfire is easily one of the most twisted musical pieces in Disney history, and in it, Froolo threatens that she will either have to surrender to him, or he will burn her down along with all of Paris. And that is Froolo in a nutshell. He is a man who cloaks pure evil in religious righteousness. He sees himself as just and moral while committing brutal atrocities in the name of order. Genocide, abuse, lust-driven cruelty, he does it all. And despite that, he still thinks that he is a good guy and justifies his actions by saying it is in the name of God. And there is nothing more dangerous than someone in the wrong with a powerful belief that they are right. Well, almost nothing. There is, of course, one last villain we need to talk about, though, and admittedly, it does kind of feel like cheating. The darkest, most malevolent character Disney has ever created is Chernabog from Fantasia. Chernabog is not clever, or manipulative, or even particularly complex. He is just evil incarnate. He is a towering demon who rises from the peak of Bald Mountain, unfolds his wings with a sound like thunder, and casts a shadow over the entire world. And when he wakes, he unleashes hell. Chernabog raises the spirits of the dead, summons fire and shadow to cover the planet, and joyously torments his victims with zero remorse or restraint. He throws souls into lava for fun, transforms and shapes demons how he sees fit, and dances through fire and chaos. There's no motivation, no backstory, no desire for power or revenge. He simply exists to spread evil. He is darkness given form, and he is only satisfied when he is making people suffer. Put simply, Chernabog is the embodiment of evil itself, and the only place he could exist is the top of this list. And that is every Disney villain ranked from least to most evil. I'm sure we could probably shuffle a few people on this list, but let us know who you think are the most evil that Disney has to offer. If you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like and subscribe. Be sure to check out our video on Disney princesses as well. For now though, thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one.